Joining us now is Matt Gaetz. Matt, welcome to the program. You're going to have to explain this one to me, Matt. You are co-sponsoring a bill with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Tell me why.
Yeah, I'll work with anyone and everyone to make Congress less corrupt. And you can disagree with a lot of AOC's views. I certainly do, and she probably disagrees a lot with mine. But we are not part of the bought and paid for caucus. She holds her views sincerely, whether you like them or not, and so do I. And one of the things that's really frustrating is when you even try to engage in debate with some of the colleagues, you don't get a sincere reaction or response to the substance of the argument, because it's all about what stock trades they have, what lobbyists pay for their votes, and what interests they're beholden to. The legislation I've sponsored with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez ends Congress insider trading stocks. Members of Congress should not be allowed to trade individual stocks. It's like letting the referee bet on the game. And I can't believe we've allowed it to occur so frequently. And when you look at the backgrounds of some of the representatives and then see the wizardry that they are able to deploy in their stock trades, it's really a head scratcher.
So I've heard you say that over $788 million of securities were traded last year. So Matt, how is this different than the Stock Act? I mean, is it kind of a joke, that Stock Act, basically?
Well, there were so many holes in the legislation that Nancy Pelosi allowed to move forward just a tad. And that really doesn't provide the level of accountability we're talking about. In our legislation, if you own any individual stocks today, you have to dump those into a blind trust. And then the blind trust doesn't just manage those. They have to actually dispose of those stocks, dispose of those securities within a period of 90 days. So we have tougher penalties. We have stricter divestment obligations for members of Congress. And we clearly delineate. You get to be either a lawmaker or an individual stock trader. You don't get to do both. And the conflict is so obvious to the American people. You know, you get folks on the right, left, and even in the middle. I want to give credit to Brian Fitzpatrick and Raja Krishnamurthy, two folks who kind of center right, center left. And we think we've got all four corners covered with the coalition we've built. Now we want to vote on the floor.
So Matt, I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit here, and I know it's going to be imprecise. What percentage of legislative decisions are made with members' stock portfolio in mind?
I don't know if it's always the legislative decision. That could be as low as 10 to 15%. But there are ways members of Congress can impact stock prices without a legislative act. For example, who a committee chairman calls before a hearing, how a particular CEO is treated with white gloves or going after them, whether or not you have requests for information, subpoenas that go out to particular entities. If members of Congress have securities in a particular entity, then they function as part of the protection ring for that entity for stuff that you, the American people, will never see.
Yeah. So Matt, just so our audience understands, are you trying to say it's technically legal? Let's just take Maxine Waters, who was previously chair of Financial Services Committee, if I'm not mistaken. You're trying to tell me that Maxine Waters could subpoena Jamie Dimon and whoever else, and then before the committee meeting, she could short the stock of J.P. Morgan. Are you trying to tell me that Maxine Waters, if she got private information, what I'm trying to get at, wasn't Senator Burr investigated for this? Wasn't Congressman Collins eventually convicted for this? I mean, he might have been pardoned. But the question is, how is it? Where is the law failing right now? Because there are some laws, but you're trying to say that there should be no trades at all whatsoever. Is that correct?
That's correct, Charlie, because to get caught by our current suite of laws, you have to be universally so corrupt and so stupid that you explicitly lay out the insider information that you are acting on. The problem is that right now, you don't really have an effective enforcement scheme to determine how those decisions are linked with trades and with actions as a lawmaker in the House of Representatives. I just think we should go cold turkey. I don't think we should try to shake this addiction in a 12-step program like some of the other bills that have been considered. I think we should just say, no, this is not allowed. If the deal of being a member of Congress isn't sweet enough for you without the ability to manage an individual stock portfolio, then just don't run. We'll take folks who don't view that as central to their public service.
Yeah, and so then, but I mean, for example, Matt, are you allowed to then trade on information that is shared in private committee as well? Is that currently legal? I mean, on non-public information?
Well, again, if you are trading on non-public information, technically that would violate the letter of the law, but there is not a robust enough enforcement regime to track that
and
information.
It's almost impossible, right? I mean, for example, Nancy Pelosi
on the Judiciary Committee right now, I know some companies that are going to get subpoenas. I know them, you don't know them, and they're in the pipeline. And so, if some family member of mine, if I go out and engage in stock trades around those eventualities, shorting those stocks because I know it's going to be bad news when these companies get these subpoenas, like, you wouldn't necessarily be able to prove that it was the insider information, which is why those prosecutions don't get really developed. But at the same time, I see how often the opportunities present, particularly around big tech, around the energy sector, and around particular committees where they have such an ability to shape how the market views individual securities by their actions or inaction.
And so you've introduced the bill. I mean, it's kind of you're almost forcing Congress to regulate themselves. I can't imagine this is going to be met with open arms, right?
Well, we want a vote. And you know what, Charlie? Probably it wouldn't pass if we had a vote on it. 1 in 4 members of Congress are engaged in this activity now. And I'm going to try to make the case to the other 3 out of every 4 members of Congress doing these trades that we don't need this, that this is not a way to build trust and confidence, regardless of which political party is in power. And I guess what gives us some sense of momentum is it's pretty rare to have a pro-impeachment Republican, Brian Fitzpatrick, a centrist Democrat, Raja Krishnamurthy, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Matt Gaetz all together on one legislative device. Our hope is to force pressure on other members to join us or have to go explain to their constituents why we ought to have a system that allows nearly $800 million to get traded each year from lawmakers who have an oversized impact on the information space and on the market space.
It's going to be very interesting to see. Again, I'm not immediately optimistic about it, but it's just nauseating how these lawmakers look at their ability. Okay, I'm a lawmaker. I get all this inside information. I get to sweeten my stock portfolio, and they wonder why Washington D.C. is hated by the rest of the country. And it really is something. So I think it's an admirable and courageous effort, truly. So Matt, I just want to ask your opinion here. Who do you think droned the Kremlin?
I'm not going to talk about that, but I have been standing against this U.S. involvement in this European war. I was one of the first 3 who tried to block the hostilities that I thought we were stumbling into. It was me, Thomas Massie, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now there's close to 70 Republicans who hold my view, but we just heard Speaker McCarthy in Israel talk about how much more he thinks we need to do for Ukraine, and that is not a position I agree with. Respectfully, I think that we need to do more for our own country, and particularly when we're talking about raising the debt limit $1.5 trillion, maybe we shouldn't be securing the pensions of the government officials in Ukraine. I saw your tweet earlier that really, I think, drew a more pointed criticism on this particular event with these drone strikes, but I'm just not able to talk about that open source.
I respect that. So let's talk about the debt ceiling. Where does that stand? To your credit and the House Republicans' credit, that this is now on Biden, and he seems to just be very flustered over this. How is this going to play out, Matt?
Well, I don't think you're going to like the answer to this, Charlie. How it's going to play out is Chuck Schumer is going to hold weeks of hearings to distort the truth about the House plan. He's going to make a cap on the growth of the federal budget appear as if we are going after veterans and seniors, which is completely nonsense. And then I suspect the Schumer-Biden strategy will be to run out the clock, put our nation on the brink of default, and then send over either a clean increase in the debt limit or a mostly clean increase in the debt limit. That'll be opposed by the fiscal hawks, which are an increasingly threatened and endangered species in the House of Representatives. And there will be a broad, I think, bipartisan push to simply raise the debt limit, act as though we're studying federal spending going forward, and kick the fights to the appropriations process and the budgeting process, where those of us who seek to put downward pressure on spending will have less leverage. So I'm not particularly optimistic, though I do believe that Speaker McCarthy and his team do deserve credit for at least putting a plan on the table that would be the most downward pressure on spending I've seen in my time in Congress.
Yeah, and we're seeing already the kind of bank collapse pattern, the overspending, the addiction to spending that Washington, D.C. has, and the impact that it's occurring. Congressman,
can we talk about the bank thing for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because with no vote of the Congress, has Joe Biden not just nationalized the banking system in this country by securing deposits even when management fails? You now create this hyper incentive structure for risk, because if you drain the consequence for depositors who are over the FDIC limit out of the banking enterprise, then any bank manager of even a medium-sized banking system is going to have every incentive to do crazy, risky things at the hopes of achieving some quarterly earning. And if it all goes to hell, they just throw their hands up in the air and turn to the federal government. This is a terrible thing for our economy, and it happened without so much as a vote in the United States Congress.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as if they are nationalizing all the banks. We had a great guest yesterday. He wasn't the first one to say this, but they want to privatize the gains and socialize the losses, which is, I mean, you're allowed to make as much profit as you can. If you dare, have any sort of decline, we're going to then have the taxpayers swoop that up. And so Matt, we only have about a minute remaining. What should House Republicans then do about this disturbing pattern of bank collapses?
Well, I don't think we should be captive to the banking industry. And increasingly, the way people get on the Financial Services Committee is that the banks want them there. So part of the broader reforms we want to make Congress more honest, less self-interested would certainly help. But specifically, I think we need to disfavor, disallow, defund, and deauthorize any system by which the Treasury Department can literally nationalize the banking system. And you said it perfectly. Privatize the gains, socialize the losses. Who do you think gets screwed in that system? Regular Americans who just want a financial system that treats everyone fairly. And the one they've built doesn't, and it's on purpose, and it's going to result in more inflation, more financial swings that crush regular folks. And we have got to stand against that.
Oh, it's absolutely on purpose. And I get asked sometimes, why are people so distrustful of the current economic orthodoxies? I said, you have no idea. The rich people get bailed out. The muscular class has to write the check to bail them out, and they get crushed, and then they get told that their values are deplorable. It's not an equation for a sustainable country. Matt, thank you so much. Appreciate it.